Welcome to Vitamin OC. I'm Whitney Gomez.
And I'm Joanna Weiss. Every week we bring you your recommended dose of civics and civilization in Orange County. We're so excited to welcome Meesh Pierce to Vitamin OC today. She is a former tech executive, current drone investor, product manager for firms like NBC, Sony, and Ticketmaster. She's been a movie and TV star momager for her son, a podcaster, furniture restorer, gardener, and mentor. We're so excited to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And Meesh is a new friend for Joanna, but we've known each other, I hate to say it, probably 30 years now.
Yes.
And you've known my husband even longer.
Yes.
And we always call you a Renaissance woman in this house. I mean, you're always coming up with surprising and unexpected things, from smoking the men on the pickleball court, to popping up at the Oscars in a fabulous dress, to befriending stars on Aladdin and getting us backstage in New York, to running your alumni club for a decade and winning big awards at a gala. You've got so many things going on, and we can't wait to talk to you about all of your projects today. You are also married to one of the most charismatic people to ever walk the earth, and your sons are similarly wonderful human beings. So thanks for coming to join us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks. I'm excited for our chat.
Whitney mentioned you'd been at the Oscars recently. That's very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yes. My son Banks has been an actor for about 3.5, 4 years, and he's enjoyed very quick success. He got invited to be on the red carpet of the Oscars for when everyone is coming in. So we had an opportunity to go to rehearsals on Saturday and then to be on the red carpet last Sunday and watch everyone come in, which was fantastic and so exhilarating. Our big job was to clap for everybody and, try to get as many selfies as possible.
What did you wear?
I wore a Zimmermann dress and some boots that are Italian from AS98. I don't know if you're familiar with that brand.
Can you tell us a little bit about your son? You had mentioned he's got quite an accomplished career, even though he's only been doing it for 3 or 4 years, that quick success. Can you tell us kind of how he started and what he's doing now?
Yes. Banks has always been very creative. He had a YouTube channel when he was very young. Because he just begged and I want to create content. He would write these little skits and he would film them, and they were often very funny and sometimes a flop, but we wanted him to basically make mistakes when he was young. So we sort of scaffolded him and we said, all right, you have to have a fake name. All of your friends have to have fake names. And you have to ask permission for your friends to be on film. And then I will actually follow up with parents and make sure. And then you're doing all production. I'm not touching any editing, nothing, but I get full veto power. So even if dad says yes, if I don't like the content, it's a no. And so he learned very early how to do that. And in 5th grade, he was in the school play, and that just sort of snowballed into, getting a commercial, getting an agent, getting another commercial, and then doing a really big popular YouTube show called Darman, where he played basically a bully every time, or, the guy who did some idiotic dumb thing and was unkind in some way, and then he learned his lesson at the end. And then he really got into voiceover. So during the strike, there was no acting to be done, but there was a lot of voiceover work. So he was the voice of Rubble from Paw Patrol. And he did podcasts and toys and commercials and games and all the things that weren't covered by what was happening under the strike. And so he kept very busy with that, and he has blossomed into, now he was on a movie with Alan Ritchson and Kevin James called Playdate. It's an Amazon movie, and it sat at #1 worldwide for about 5 weeks. And he was most recently on The Pitt as a recurring co-star.
So just a little plug for Playdate. Everyone I know knows that I fall asleep in any dark room immediately. And Playdate, I didn't sleep a wink. It was fantastic. It was such a fun movie, and you had such a great premiere for the event. A couple hundred people there.
Yeah, we had 450 people.
Great. And at the end, there was a Q&A with the director, with Banks, with another, was it a stunt person, or who else was there?
Yes, the stunt coordinator was there as well. Her name is Maya Aro. She's great.
And here's this young man fielding all these questions and did such a great job. And talk about how you keep him normal and then I'll tell my story about the end of that event, which just tickled me.
My husband and I were very reticent to have him enter into this field because you hear a lot of bad things, and we weren't sure. We're not from the industry. I mean, I worked for entertainment companies, but I always worked on the tech side. And so we weren't really sure. And so we've been very protective, very guarded. We wanted to make sure we had a good team around him so that we could really say yes or no to things and not feel judged. And, so he is an athlete. He plays a ton of sports. He's very active. He's on ASB, all these things. He plays baseball. He played football. He's very curious. He's very similar to me in that way. And so we try to keep him as best as we can in regular school and making sure that he's staying with his friends and getting the beat down from his big brother from time to time.
So this was just a fawning Q&A. I was like, oh, did you do your own stunts? Like it was really it was really funny, and he handled it beautifully. And at the end, this voice pops up and says, how come you're last in your fantasy football league? And I was just like, who said that? Of course, his older brother popping the balloon, bringing him back down to earth in just the most beautiful fashion. And poor Banks was like, I've been really busy. I haven't had time to. And of course, his brother's a big sports statistics guru. So, I mean, he hit him right where it hurt, because that's Grayson's area.
Yeah, and it's the perfect big brother moment. And I think that's why this works for our family, because Grayson is not an actor and he's not at all interested in the industry. I would imagine having multiple kids in the industry would be really challenging, because typically you have one that's better than another or has a better look or whatever it may be. There's a lot of competition. And every time we come back from some big exciting thing, Big Brother is there to put him back in place.
That's perfect. That's a great role for him.
Can you tell us a little bit about being on a movie set? I'm imagining if you're a little bit protective, I imagine you've spent some time on those movie sets and the television sets supporting him. What's that like?
Yeah, so by law, you have to be on set with anyone who's under 18. And there is a set teacher who is on with the child. And so the set teacher is not only teaching during the school year, but is also acts as a social worker. So making sure that all the rules are being met and everyone is, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. It's frenetic. And for me, coming from my background, sort of being a producer, I mean, there are a lot of different names for what I've done, whether it's producer, project manager, product manager. It's really the same job, and it's really producing. It's being the hub and talking to the engineers and talking to the business and talking to marketing and sales and making sure everything comes together. And that's very similar to what a first AD is on set. And so you have all these people running in different directions, and there's certain people that, carry the cable, and there's certain people that make the food. And, so for me, from my perspective, and I wrote about it a lot on my LinkedIn, it was really an exercise of, oh, wow, what are the similarities that I've experienced in the corporate world? And what's really hard for me when I'm on set is to not say, oh, we can do that faster or better, different. I have to really be careful just to stay in my Momager lane. And so that has been probably a really hard challenge for me. But it's interesting, and every set is different. So you arrive, you're expected to be ready, you're expected to be fresh, and to be professional. And it's really great to see how these kids come to set and they're prepared and they're ready and they're talented. And a lot of times they're more well prepared than the adults, because I feel like a kid is just loose and they don't overthink things, and it's just, like what they're feeling, as opposed to, I think as you get a little bit older, maybe people start to second guess, was that a good choice? Should I say this? Should I try this? And so it's been really fun because they've learned from some really big names and have been able to work with, Banks has had the opportunity to work with some really great directors. So it's been fantastic.
You've told some great behind the scenes stories, like the setup at the Oscars, the staging of the Pitt. Yes. Can you give us some inside baseball?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Oscars is very interesting. So it's actually held at Hollywood and Vine. And so it's a venue that is actually set inside an outdoor mall. And so when you see photos of the red carpet, the beginning of the red carpet is actually on Hollywood Boulevard. And you see all these gold drapes. Well, this past year for the 98th Oscars, you see these gold drapes that are going up, and it's because there's like an Auntie Anne's right behind there, and a Hot Topics behind the other one. And so the production of the Oscars is absolutely incredible. And the security around trying to get, a mall secure. And my understanding is they still have shoppers because we were there on Saturday, right? And they were doing the rehearsals. There are people who are actually shopping there. And
That's incredible.
And I don't know what time the mall closes, but I imagine they have to boot people out at some point so that they can really secure everything, particularly this Oscars. There were a lot of threats. And so, there were security people swarming everywhere. And what's really cool about, we got sort of a behind the scenes tour of the whole Oscars facility, which was incredible. It was just mind blowing. But they had a big, huge security thing that you walked through. And then they have 2 red carpets. They have one for the A-list people, and then they have one for everyone else. And then the A-list people, they actually have 2 lines because they need to keep the traffic going. And the press on both sides are the same on both sides. May can decide he's going to go left or he's going to go right, but he's still going to get the same press. And in between those 2 lanes is a tunnel, and that's where the publicists and the family and everyone else walks through there. So when you're seeing people on the step and repeat, you're not seeing anyone who's not supposed to be there. They're walking through this tunnel, and then they come out the tunnel, and then that's where all the rest of the press is, and that's where the fans are. And I believe it's probably one of the longest red carpets in the world because this thing goes forever, and then you turn the corner, and then you go up those famous stairs. It's pretty incredible.
And then you mentioned that there's a special hallway after the award recipients get their Oscar. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so after they get their award, they go to this backstage area, and it's called Winner's Walk. And so it's a red carpet thing that connects from the auditorium all the way through to the hotel. And in the hotel area, they have staged, it's hundreds, if not thousands of press outlets. And so that walk, they really try to give the Oscar winner a moment to either be with their one person or just to be by themselves to really collect. Because it's so emotional, I would imagine. And so, so they get to walk down for about, I would say, they get to have about 5 minutes to themselves where they can just do that before they go into all the mayhem of and I only saw that behind the scenes. I didn't get to see it in action. I saw it the day before, but it was just a banquet room with rows and rows and rows and rows of tables and, press. And the press are squished in. So on the red carpet, each outlet gets about, I'm not kidding, it might be 2 feet or 3 feet, and they're all squished in there trying to get the interview. Wow. It's really interesting.
Bring your skinny reporters. Tell us about the Pit, because I was so fascinated by this.
Yeah, so the Pit is phenomenal. So as a lot of people know, Noah Wyle was on ER, and my understanding is they really brought a lot of the team back together. The Pit was probably the most efficient, well-run, and well-produced show that we've had the opportunity to be on. And so very organized, and they basically have built in the lot on Warner Brothers. They have a sound stage. They actually have 2 sound stages, and it's really an interior of an ER. And so you are in there, and they have about 100 to 130 people because they have every background person. So imagine if you're an actor and you book a background role on the Pit. You are in the same gear with the same, whatever bandage you have on your left eye, and you are going, I think they work at least 6 months. And they're sitting in the same gurney or the same chair or the same wheelchair. And all of the people who are crew actually wear scrubs so that if a makeup person by accident gets, filmed, it just looks like another doctor walking in the background. And so when they call action, so they call 2 actions, they typically call background action, so everyone starts moving and they all know exactly where they're going. They've all been trained. They actually have real doctors and real nurses who are on set who have trained. They do a training before every season of how to intubate, how to do CPR, how to do an IV line. It's very sophisticated. And so they actually have real people on there. And so everyone has a job. So the nurses know exactly where they're going, what they're doing. And so they're walking and walking and walking. And so as a parent, what's interesting, typically when you're on set as a parent, you actually can sit within eye shot of your child. And on this set, you can't because there's just too much going on. There's nowhere to hide. And the camera is moving in all directions. And so the other parent and I had to sort of sit off in a different room watching a monitor, which was sort of fun. Max's scene was so emotional. It was heart-wrenching. He's the son of a patient who's dying. And I was glad I wasn't right next to him because I was really emotional. So I actually had to get up and leave several times during filming because I couldn't even watch it.
I cry almost every episode. I'll be like unloading the dishwasher with it on and I'm suddenly crying. It's such a good show. So he's season 2, episodes
7 through 10.
7 through 10. Fine banks there.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
That's really creative of the set designers and everything. That's a really unique situation.
Yeah, and they don't change lighting or anything. So they just have all the overhead lighting as they would in an ER. And I'm sure there's special lights. So it moves really quickly. And they film in sequence, which is very atypical. If you're in a movie, sometimes you'll film the very last scene first, but not on the Pitt. They film in sequence.
Okay.
So part of you being such a wonderful Renaissance woman, you are involved with drones with special ops veterans.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you're bringing public safety through drones and what that project's about?
I would love to talk about that. So yes, I am working with a company called Braycor Solutions, and it is co-founded by a Navy SEAL. He served on Team 1, and he was very involved with running the drones for the SEALs team, for his team, as well as he partnered up with another guy who was a veteran who was in naval warfare, and he was the officer in charge of the entire UAS platform for the Navy. So these two guys came together and they said, hey, what's interesting about Navy SEALs, I think in our minds, it's like, oh yeah, they're out and they're battling and they're swimming and they're doing all these things. But a lot of times they sit around and they're practicing how to malfunction weapons so that they can put them back together. Because if they are in a situation, they have to know how to clear their weapon. They have to know how to, be able to use their tools. And so they spent a lot of time doing that. So he came up with this idea of, hey, we can actually malfunction weapons and we can do it with a drone. So the main platform is called Indoor Drone as First Responder. And what it does is it can detect, track, and malfunction weapons in active shooter situations. So shotguns, rifles, and handguns. And it's fascinating because they've designed the platform in such a way that it can actually integrate with any existing security platform. So a lot of companies, warehouses, retail, schools, university, a lot of organizations need this type of security and they already have cameras in place. And a lot of these cameras now can be upgraded with AI software through a variety of different security companies, so ADT or any of these companies, and they can make sure that if a threat is detected, they can immediately launch a drone that's pre-positioned in a facility. Or if there isn't a threat, so a lot of times you're not necessarily worried about a threat, you're just worried about, hey, we need to be able to patrol in tight places, or we need to be able to send a patrol more frequently, and we don't have the bandwidth to do it because our warehouse is 1 million square feet, and our cameras can't possibly cover every part of it. So how can we send drones? So it's can be considered a flying camera, and if it detects something, what these guys know of from warfare is that when a drone approaches a threat, typically the threat doesn't know what the payload is on the drone, so they will drop the weapon and surrender, or they will drop and run. But most of the time they're worried about what's going to happen to them. You talk about there's a process called OODA loop. It's when you're thinking about especially a bad threat, when they're thinking about going in and perhaps shooting a school or whatever it is, whatever the bad scenario is. And these guys have actually interviewed former active shooters, and so they've spoken to these people, and they basically are saying, I've been so hurt in my life. I've had so much pain that I want to inflict that much pain back. And so they replay in their mind over and over and over again, thousands of times, what they're going to do. And so when you present a drone in that situation, they're not thinking of that. They absolutely don't know what to do. And so it just at least distracts them, gets eyes on it. So you're having a live feed being sent to your security team and to first responders. And then they can make informed decisions. They can say, okay, we know exactly where this is. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you could just shoot the drone. Okay, great. Shoot the $15,000 drone rather than killing people. And you can have multiple drones. You don't have to just have one. So you can imagine it's a game changer, because just like a fire sprinklers, right? We don't wait for the fire department to arrive. We immediately, when you pull the handle on the sprinklers, water is coming down and it's helping to put out the fire. Same thing. We don't have any way of preventing active shooters or critical threats. Now we do.
Where can people see the video you shot describing this whole process?
If you do a search for Braycorps Solutions, and Braycorps is a cool name. Braycorps was actually a manor, was in World War II. And the story behind it is these Army guys arrived and they had to figure out how they're going to take over this, big parcel of land. But there were a lot of fighters there, and there were also a bunch of tanks. So if you Band of Brothers, one of the episodes is sort of about this. So what they did was they went and they systematically took down the tanks. So they dismantled the weapon, not necessarily the people. The focus was to take out the weapon, and that's exactly what these guys do. So you can also look it up on YouTube.
It's quite a video.
It is. It's great.
It's really good. You also have a podcast called Mentor DNA. Can you tell us what you've evolved into with that?
Yeah, so unfortunately I don't have as much time to work on that anymore because I'm spending so much time on the road with banks or doing other things. But Mentor DNA was an idea. I wanted to interview C-suite executives with whom I had worked, who were really under the radar, to share their career paths. What it was designed for is VP level people to figure out how they can break into a C-suite or onto a board. What I have found is while those are my listeners, I also have a younger, listener group who are these kids who are in college. And I think it's important because I start with, and Whitney, I had you on the show, my first question is, tell me about your career and where you started. What was your very first job? And your first job was delivering newspapers, as was, I would say, 70% of the people I've had on the show, which now we don't even have newspapers, right. But it's a common thread of I started early and I was a hustler and I was curious and, I wanted to make something happen for myself. And so I did. And so, yeah, I've spoken to some really interesting people. One really great one, which I think you would love if you haven't heard the episode, is Pilar Ramos. She's my little sister from my sorority. She grew up in New Orleans and she is now general counsel at Starbucks. So she worked her way through law school and went to big firm route and then worked in a bunch of different Latin America groups. And then she was at MasterCard for a long time. And now she's, the big wig at Starbucks. I just think it's an interesting story to say, hey, where did I start and where did I go? Most people don't have a linear path. They go here, 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 here. And I think young people need to hear that. I think a lot of people get hung up on, what if I make the wrong decision? Well, then you can change and you can change course and it's okay. And most people do. I would say with the exception of 2 people on my show, everyone was this, and this. Only 2 people really had a direct path and stayed with their job for 30 years, which is unheard of. No one's done that.
Well, we were the benefits of the beneficiaries of your mentorship. So you have brought your podcast to your real life and you served as such an inspiration to us when we got our podcast started. Thank you so much for that. And you helped us figure out which microphones to buy and how to get this all set up. And so thank you for living out that Mentor DNA theme.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad.
Misha's a mama duck. She has a lot of ducklings that follow her along.
I love that. I love that.
Okay, before we let you go, what's next for Banks?
So he has been auditioning. He has had a couple of callbacks. It comes in waves. You just never know what's going to happen. And he just turned, he's like in the teen years. And so it's interesting because you can get like Scooby-Doo, for example. Scooby-Doo wanted to book, they said they wanted to book 16-year-olds. But it's really hard because you have to have a set teacher. You have to put the parent up. And so a lot of times they'll hire an 18-year-old who looks younger. So an 18-year-old who can play 15, 16, 17, they don't have to hire a set teacher. So the teen years it's sort of called the dead zone. A lot of teen, actors, sort of like you don't know what's going to happen. He's still doing a lot of auditions, though. He just, did a couple of auditions for voiceover and commercial. And, occasionally we have to pass on content just because as parents, we're like, you know what, that's not a good fit, or he doesn't feel comfortable. So now he's getting more involved in saying, hey, I'd like this, or I'm okay with this. So, originally on Playdate, that script, so his first audition, it was sort of weird because if you haven't seen it, I don't necessarily want to spoil it, but you're not really sure who he is because he doesn't talk a lot. And he's sort of like, sort of shut down. You're like, who is this? Like, he's a bad actor. A few friends actually came up and they're like, well, we're sort of wondering, like, he's not really that good of an actor. And then you get further along in the story and you're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. But when he got the callback for that audition, that script had like 8 F-bombs. And my husband and I were like, this isn't okay because he was 12. And we weren't really cool with that, but they sent the full script. So then, the team said, hey, can we see the full script? So then we see the full script and then we read it and we go, oh, okay, that sort of makes a little bit more sense. We still don't love it, but it works in the story arc. And so therefore we would be okay with it, not great. And all I could think of was, oh my gosh, his grandparents, his kindergarten teacher, the Christian school, like, oh, how are we going to explain it to everyone? And so, now that he's in his teen years, it's like, okay, it's harder and harder to, guide, because there's a lot of strategy, I feel like. Do you want to be in this type of show all the time? You can pigeonhole yourself. Or do you want to be more of this type of actor? And so making choices of just your auditions, because you get known and you get invited by certain casting teams. And it's a really tricky balance of figuring out, are we okay with this? Is he okay with it? Times like in Playdate, they ended up making it PG-13 and they took all the language out.
Perfect.
Yeah. So you just don't really know.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been so great speaking with you and covering so many different topics with you. We really appreciate you sharing your time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Renaissance woman Meesh Pierce, thank you for joining us. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for your recommended dose of civics and civilization in Orange County.
We'll see you next time on Vitamin OC.